have to wait and see.
All
But
right.
if Georgia and North Carolina go to Trump, then that means for Kamala Harris, it's a very straight but narrow path to victory, which is that she has to win Pennsylvania, she has to win Michigan, and she has to win Wisconsin. And all of those three states, very limited amounts of vote count have happened so far. I believe in Pennsylvania, less than 20% of the vote has been counted. Yes, Kamala Harris is leading by a wide margin, but it is very, very early days yet. It's going to take a while before we get the results of these three states. And frankly, I think Kamala Harris's presidential chances, her hope of winning the presidency rests on these three states. Unless she wins all three, I don't see her having a path to 270.
Interesting. Zaka, stay on with me. We have Ray Locker, author and journalist, Sanang Mittal, who's a communication strategist. Mr. Mittal, I want to bring you here. We are just getting in news, as my colleague Zaka was also just pointing it out, about the early leads coming in and Trump looking good, at least for now, in the very crucial battleground states of Georgia and North Carolina. Georgia, in fact, it had been leading to Republican, but it also had seen this pivotal shift in 2020 when Biden had beaten Trump. But what does this mean with him taking a lead, at least in the initial threats? I know it's too soon to call the election, and the important voting in the swing states still has to happen, especially Pennsylvania. But what do you make of these early trends coming in?
Yeah, these early trends, as other panelists have said, are reflective of the past realities of what happened in past elections. What you also have to remember is that one of the reasons that Trump was calling for that the election was stolen or there were issues was because a lot of the late votes that came in seemed to him, at least, to be wrong or somehow winning, and then all of a sudden he wasn't winning, and those were because of the absentee ballots. Those were because of the late votes that were being counted. And so again, all of this early exuberance about Trump's lead may actually die out or be dulled as the later votes, the absentee ballots, completely fill in and maybe reduce some of that lead. So remains to be seen what's going to happen. I think Trump, definitely took a better tack with Georgia this time. He tried very hard to not anger the governor, who's very popular in Georgia, and tried very hard not to, completely go all in on him and on the people of Georgia, because Georgia should have been Republican. In 2020, there were two Republican senators from there, and now there's two Democrat senators, and there's no that cost the Republicans the Senate leadership. So
Right.
nobody in the Republican side at least wants to see them lose Georgia one more time.
Oh, that's true. But it was a very close contest between Biden and Trump in Georgia, isn't it, Mr. Mittal? 49.5% to 49.3%, if I'm not mistaken. I just have to take a very short break right here, gentlemen. I'll come back to you in just a bit. Stay tuned. We'll be back with lots more big news and these updates, early trends coming in on the U.S. presidential elections. Keep watching.
Which means that Kamala Harris will stay. But you do have a Madison Square Garden rally that took place earlier, which has been making headlines over here. Democrats and whoever chooses to be Republican, many of them have been undecided about who to vote for.
Quickly talk about the 2016 pattern, because so much is being spoken of in terms of what one can expect and how surprising really can the verdict be. What do you make of what some of the experts have been able to suggest so far in the conversations that you've had? Because in 2016, Donald Trump managed to bag the blue line, all of those three states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin and Michigan. Kamala Harris, of course, has her hopes pinned on the same. But North Carolina as well. There are indications that North Carolina may just go to the Democrats. So nothing can be ruled out, and that's why it's being called a neck and neck.
Oh, absolutely. Like, no one expected Biden to win Georgia 4 years ago. Georgia has never gone to a Democrat since 1992, when Bill Clinton won Georgia. So it was a huge shock. It was a huge surprise that Biden flipped Georgia 4 years ago. I think the interesting thing is, I think you've sort of got to a point where North Carolina and Georgia both will be called before Pennsylvania. And one thing to watch out for is if either of those two states, either North Carolina or Georgia, go the Democrat way, go to Harris, then it's going to be a blowout night for her, because right now the Harris campaign has focused all of its energies, much of its energies, on these three blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan and Wisconsin, in the hope that those three states will tip them over the 270 mark. But if the turnout is so massive and people are motivated enough to vote for whatever reason it is, it could be abortion that's on the line.
57.5% of the vote, Donald Trump 41.5% of the vote, Kamala Harris with a 258,000 plus vote lead. That's with about a quarter, 23% of the estimated vote in Pennsylvania counted as of now. In battleground Michigan, Kamala Harris with 53.7% of the vote. Donald Trump with 44.3% of the vote. Harris with a 64,000 plus vote lead. That's with an estimated 12% of the vote counted in Michigan. Still very early in Michigan. In battleground North Carolina, Donald Trump in the lead. 50.7% of the vote. Harris with 48.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 75,000 plus vote lead. That's with more than half, 51% of the estimated vote counted in battleground North Carolina. In battleground Georgia, Donald Trump still holding on to his lead, 52.9% of the vote. Harris has 46.4% of the vote. Donald Trump right now with a 249,000 plus vote lead. Now it's a 255,000 vote lead. That's with an estimated 71% of the vote counted in battleground Georgia. In Virginia, Donald Trump in the lead as of now, 49.3% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 48.7% of the vote. Donald Trump is ahead by more than 15,000 votes. That's with more than half, 56% of the estimated vote, but still a lot of vote to come in the Commonwealth of Virginia. In New Hampshire, Harris with 53.4% of the vote. Donald Trump with 45.9% of the vote. Harris with an 18,000 plus vote lead. That's with under a third of the vote counted in New Hampshire. 30% of the estimated vote counted in New Hampshire. In Ohio, Donald Trump in the lead, 54.3% of the vote. Harris with 44.8% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 332,000 plus vote lead. That's with almost 60%, 58% of the estimated vote counted in the Buckeye state. Now let's go to John King at the Magic Wall. John.
And so, Jake, you lay out the results, and there are some surprises there, right? At least where we are right now. So we just want to go back and follow up where we were. David Chellian was talking about some of the outstanding vote. We know in Virginia is early vote, and that percentage is going to jump, and we know that the vice president is doing quite well in that vote. So I just want to show you what he means by how this can change. Again, Donald Trump's lead has been shrinking. It was 16,000 not that long ago. It's 12,395 now. Look at the Northern Virginia suburbs here. I just want to show you these circles help us understand where are there live outstanding votes, meaning votes that we know are out there that have not been counted yet. Right? You see the big circles, the biggest circles around the Northern Virginia suburbs, also Richmond and the suburbs around that, and some big Republican circles down here, Virginia Beach area, and some here in the suburbs more to the south, the exurbs south of Richmond. But I want to focus up here, and just to show you why you can say early on, you say, whoa, what's happening here? But then things can change pretty quickly when large population centers report their votes. So let's take Fairfax County. It's the largest of the suburban counties. It's the #1 county population-wise in Virginia. The vice president's getting 66% of the vote, 63% of the vote in. Look at the number where she is, though, 250,000. We know turnout is robust, right? So we should be somewhere around 2020 when we end 2024. Maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower, but somewhere around it. 250,000 votes right now. If you go back in time, you see 419,000 votes. So if she's winning 60+%, the president was winning 70% 4 years ago. You have Vice President Harris winning 66, a little below. Virginia looks like it's going to be a little bit more competitive this year. But you can see just right there in that one county, there's a lot of votes still out, and she's winning disproportionately in the math right now. That can change, but it generally tracks when you get above 60% of the vote. And so just in that one county right there, the math, when those votes come in, the math can change. So it doesn't mean it will. But there's more than enough Democratic votes still outstanding, or votes outstanding in Democratic areas is the better way to put it, for that to happen. So let's check in on the other battlegrounds as we go through. This one, again, go back in time. This was the closest Donald Trump victory in a battleground state. Of the battlegrounds he won, 74,000 votes, 483, 74,483. 4 years ago, he's 110 ahead right now, but we're only at 54% of the vote, right? So you see these gray areas. What are those? That's where you have no votes in yet. So we're still waiting. Some of these smaller counties. This one.
All right, we also have with us right now on the broadcast Harsh Shringla, the ambassador who's joining us. Mr. Shringla, thank you so much for speaking to CNN News 18. We've just gotten these early results, early trends coming in right now. Trump surging past 150 electoral votes. In fact, he's holding on to his lead in important states like North Carolina and Georgia as well. But if you speak if we talk about the US president, it's been full of twists and turns with 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump. From India's perspective, I wanted to understand from you how important is this election, and also, you know, if at all the former president Donald Trump is elected to power, what does this mean for India, given his very strategic outreach recently to the Indian diaspora, how he condemned the recent attacks on Indian minorities in Bangladesh?
So just a brief word before I respond to your question to put things in perspective. I think it's very early, and
Yes,
the trends
indeed.
that you're seeing does not indicate in any way the final result, because these are expected trends. And what is important are the battleground states, and I think what's important is
Yes.
Pennsylvania and Michigan, where Kamala Harris seems to be leading.
She's
But
leading in
having said that,
Pennsylvania, yes.
and Michigan, I think. So I think having said that, let's come down to the question at hand. I think obviously the U.S. elections is very important for a close strategic partner like India. We are so interlinked in many ways to the U.S. economy in terms of investments, technology, trade, the people-to-people ties, but also at the political level, a strategic connect between our two countries as Quad partners brings us, I think, much closer in many senses. The defense aspect of it also cannot be underemphasized.
Oh, absolutely. You know why, Mr. Shringla, I talked about Trump is because of his camaraderie that he shares with the Prime Minister, and you know how both of them are very aligned as far as Trump making America great again and Modi's emphasis on India first. You know, both of them having very similar interests as far as domestic economy is concerned, or secure borders as well.
Yeah, well, I've seen firsthand the personal connect that Donald Trump had with Prime Minister Modi. I think they really hit it off very well. Howdy Modi was a prime example of how the two came together to address an audience of 50,000 Indian Americans. And then Trump came to India, and we had Namaste Trump, which was a huge success with the 1 lakh people in that stadium in Ahmedabad. But having said that, the Prime Minister also has a very, very good relationship with Kamala Harris. He has met her as Vice President in 2021 and last year when I think he visited Washington, D.C., had a state visit there. And from that point of view, it's very important that whoever is President of the United States has a good rapport with the Prime Minister of India for that relationship to move forward.
True.
So Prime Minister Modi has had a great relationship with President Obama, President Trump, President Biden, and with Vice President Kamala Harris. And I think that's the way it should be. But yes, I mean, Trump has been president. He's a known commodity. We've dealt with him. He's got good things to say about Prime Minister Modi and about India. I think he's cognizant about some of the concerns that we have, not only in India, but in our neighborhood. So I think
and he also cut military aid to Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Shringla, isn't that right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Absolutely. That happened when I was ambassador, and successive U.S. presidents have been threatening to cut military aid to Pakistan, and Trump really went and did it. And he also brought down other assistance to Pakistan to a bare minimum. So I think he means business. And even in terms of tariffs, we are worried about tariffs. He did increase some of the tariffs with India, but then he went and levied a 25% tariff increase on $350 billion of Chinese imports into America. And I think that really gave us a window of opportunity, which took our trade to a much higher level, and our exports really boomed as a result of that. So there is a collateral benefit that we've seen. And even in his campaign, in the last 1 month, he's used the word China 40 times. And of course, I think his focus has been on the strategic aspects of the US's outlook. In many senses, we share from a Quad perspective and as a strategic partner of the United States.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, both the leaders have emphasized on domestic growth, on economic nationalism, and most importantly, secure borders. Kindly stay on with me, Ambassador. I also have with us on the broadcast Dr. Joseph M. Chalil, who's a noted author, Seher Khan, a foreign policy expert as well. Thank you so much, and a very good morning to all of my guests. Dr. Joseph, what do you make of this very tightly fought elections between the former president and the Vice President Kamala Harris? I mean, both of them neck and neck. These are some real anxious moments for the people of the United States. You know, it's an election which is immensely significant in U.S. history as well.
Good morning and greetings from Palm Beach, Florida, hometown of Donald Trump. I was just at the convention center. We were, usually the watch parties for election nights are in smaller halls with, let's say, 1,000 or 2,000 people. Trump actually moved his convention watch party to the Palm Beach Convention Center, which can host tens of thousands of people. And it's sold out for the past few days. We couldn't even get a journalist in there. So the excitement is very big here. This is maybe in my lifetime, I've been working, here for over 24 years with multiple Republican presidents and Democratic presidents. This is the first time it's a changed election. The electorate has changed. The coalition has changed. So if Trump is able to pull this off, I think it's going to be a miracle. But I'm expecting that not just the presidency, but they are feeling very good about the Senate and the Congress, because the president by himself is handicapped without having the Senate control, because the Senate is needed to confirm all the appointees, including all the ministers, secretaries, as we call it here, and all the department heads need to be approved and confirmed by the Senate. So let's say even the president wins without Senate majority, he's the handicapped president. So, but again, even though what we see, the early leads, nothing is surprising as we speak from the results we see. But remember, the Florida, where I'm from, and Ohio, where now both places Trump won, were
both places have gone the Trump way. Dr. Joseph, just kindly stay on with me, and Seher, I'll just come to you in a moment. Zaka Jacob is also joining us right now. In fact, he's getting us all the live updates as well. Zaka, as Dr. Joseph was mentioning, it's a changed election. It's a changed electorate as well. I want you to talk a little bit more about the key demographics groups that's going to be a decider in this presidential election, because Trump did lose ground with the white college voters in especially the swing states. I mean, Biden won 6 out of the 7 states. A lot, in fact, had changed post-COVID as well. So if you could just talk about, the shift that we have seen in American politics as well.
I'll just come to that in 1 second. I think there's a lot of noise here in the crowd that's there at Howard University. A large number, they're shouting Kamala Harris, saying we will win. There's a giant screen where they're playing CNN, so I suspect there is some state or some key race alert or project. There is so much screaming going on. I don't know what state has been called. What I do know so far is that Georgia and North Carolina, more than 70% of the vote has been counted.
It's New York. They've called New York. And that's perhaps why we are hearing the jubilant voices behind you and the celebrations as well.
Okay, that's 28 Electoral College votes. So the Electoral College math is now sort of bumping up a little bit more for Kamala Harris. But look, all of this is actually, frankly, irrelevant, because these are all states that are set. Ultimately, the president is going to be chosen by those half a dozen or so battleground states. And there, 2 of those states, Georgia and North Carolina, one went to Biden, the other went to Trump last time around. Georgia was very, very close last time. It was just 12,000 votes that separated the 2 candidates. This time around, over 70% of the vote has been counted. And last time I checked, Donald Trump had a 200,000 odd lead. So I think it's safe to, in the suburbs of Atlanta and Metro Atlanta, where there is still a ton of votes to come, unless there is a dramatic change of fortunes there, I think it looks like Georgia might go back to the Republican corner, as it always was. Remember, the last Democrat who carried Georgia before Biden was Bill Clinton in 1992. Again, in North Carolina, more than 70% of the vote has been counted. And last I checked, Trump was leading over 100,000. So he's again in relatively safer territory, if I may say so. Again, still 30% of the vote to be counted. But in the other blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, only 20% of the vote has been counted, which means there is still 80% of the vote that needs to be counted. Similarly, in Michigan, only 10% of the vote has been counted so far, so 90% of the vote is still outstanding. So I think it's going to take a long time to get to those 3 states to at least get to a point where, they're 50% in or 60% in counted. But I think the critical thing is what this means, if Georgia and North Carolina stay with Trump, then it means Harris has one straight shot at the presidency, and that is she has to win Pennsylvania, she has to win Michigan, she has to win Wisconsin. Is that an ideal place you want to find yourself in as a candidate who is hoping to win the presidency? No, it's not an ideal place because it's your one straight line shot. You have to win those three states. Even if you miss one of those states, you're out of the competition. Whereas for Donald Trump, if he manages to retain Georgia and North Carolina, and we'll see how Arizona and Nevada go. We don't know the projections for those two states.
Right.
But Arizona, he's been leading by over 2 points for the last couple of weeks. So that means then Trump needs to win just one of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, which puts him in a slightly more comfortable position than Kamala Harris.
Well, he's holding on to his lead, at least for now, in North Carolina and Georgia, two very crucial battleground states. Let's just quickly dip into our sister channel, CNN, because there is some very important information coming in as well. Listen in.
Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, hold that Nebraska congressional district I just showed you, then you're the president of the United States. Right? That's her easiest. No path is easy, but her easiest path is keep the blue wall. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. So let's move up Wisconsin so you can get a better look at home. She's ahead right now at the moment, but we're only 18% of the vote. And again, John's a broken record tonight, but I want you to look up at all of those gray areas. And I just want to remind you, in most of them, not all of them, but in most of them, you're in rural Trump country. So as you come back to the 2024 map and you say the vice president's ahead, that's where you want to be. You want to be ahead, but you've got a long way to go. So what are we looking for? I'm going to do this in reverse order. Because of the questions about young voters turning out, whether unhappiness with the White House over Israel-Gaza, Israel-Hamas policy would impact youth turnout. 38% in Dane County, that's the University of Wisconsin. Absolutely essential for any Democratic win in Wisconsin to run it up here, not just in the percentage, but with the raw math. So let's look. 38% of the vote. So a long way to go. Long way to go. Let's just compare it to the president. President Biden had 76%. Keep an eye on it. Don't panic yet if you're a Democrat, but keep an eye on that because the vice president needs to be as close to that as she can be. And at the moment, she's running a little bit behind that. That's Dane County. That's Madison. This is the biggest population center. Spent a lot of time here in the last year. The big question here is, do black voters turn out? And the subset question of that is, does Donald Trump make inroads, especially among black men? We did see some evidence of that in our several trips out to Milwaukee. At the moment, I was texting with somebody in Milwaukee earlier, by the way, who said they thought turnout was actually going pretty good for the Democrats. We'll see if that turns out. At the moment, 25% of the vote in, 66% if you round up, 32% for Donald Trump. So let's just go back in time knowing we have a long way to go. And Milwaukee sometimes reports late. But if you go back in time, Joe Biden again, 69%, Trump at 29%. So the 69% is what jumps out. Trump is a little above right now. Trump's a little above where he was 4 years ago. She's a little behind where the president was 4 years ago. It's only 25% of the vote. We're not pouring cement on any of this, but that's where you say, oh, we got to keep an eye on that as we go forward. Then you move over here, you go into the WOW counties, Waukesha, the biggest among them. This is a Republican suburb. Long has been a Republican suburb. The challenge for Democrats, I've been saying this about Trump in the battleground states that tend to lead in blue. Where's Trump's number in the suburbs? Can he compete? He's not going to win, but can he compete? That's the challenge for the vice president here. Waukesha County tends to be a Republican suburb. So there she is at 40%, Trump at 59%. Again, you go back in time, 59% to 39% 4 years ago. Welcome to another 20,000 vote race.
All right, so those are some of these early trends, and we reiterate it's just too soon, very, very early, information coming in right now. Seher Khan joins us. She's a foreign policy expert. Seher, thank you so much, first of all, for your patience. Seher, now, that's the news coming in. Donald Trump surging that 100 mark in electoral votes. I want to talk about, how has Donald Trump come back from political abyss? I mean, his popularity plummeted as he tried to overturn the 2020 elections, and then all of a sudden he rebounded and with the early leads coming in, surging past the 100 electoral votes. So what do you make of the dominance of Donald Trump despite all the scams and scandals against him?
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's such a pleasure to speak to you. And of course, I've been watching the election race quite closely as well. I think the question you ask has been on everybody's mind. And To some extent, I think this kind of represents or indicates the division in American society. And certainly in 2020, former President Trump's reputation and his popularity plummeted because at the end of the day, the peaceful transition of power has been a hallmark of US democracy, regardless of how contentious races have been and how candidates have argued on debates and on the campaign trail. When an election has been lost, the losing candidate has always shook the hand of the winning candidate, and there has been a smooth transition of power. And that did not happen in 2020. And for a lot of Americans, that was a wake-up call of how divided America has become. And I think this election, what we're really seeing is a dissatisfaction with the Biden presidency and the Biden administration on several key issues. Some domestic, but also some international as well. And usually in US elections, foreign policy doesn't play that big of a role. Most elections, while we'll talk about foreign policy, it'll be a point on the campaign trail. When people come out to vote, they're voting for domestic issues. So you have the economy, you have jobs, you have abortion, stuff like that, that becomes a bigger player. I think now, because of the wars that are engulfing our world in Ukraine, in Gaza, and the electorate being younger and and they're basically using social media a lot for their news, I think we're seeing a change also in how people want the US presidency to react. So I do agree that it's a little too early to tell, how, and all the states that have been called are what we expected. So there are no surprises there.
Yes.
So I think it's a little too early to be thinking if this is a Trump presidency or not. But I really think it really shows how divided America is. The demographics of America are changing, and this is what we're seeing playing out now.
Oh, indeed. And I completely second you on that, how the demographics have changed, how there's been a shift in American politics in the last few years, especially post-COVID. Ambassador Shringla, as I've been saying, how significant these elections are in the US history, how do you think it would impact not just the nation's future, but also global geopolitics in the years to come?
It's absolutely critical, I feel, because we are in a very, very volatile state as far as global affairs is concerned. You have regional conflicts that are threatening to become global conflicts. The US is at the heart of all of this in terms of, its both its involvement and its ability to impact on these conflicts.
Yes.
I think whoever becomes president would have a great responsibility. A good part of the world looks to the United States for global leadership on these issues. And I think there is a sense that, the world has had enough of conflicts. You need, someone at the helm who can actually try and resolve these conflicts and get them to reach some conclusion. Because, not only the effect they have on the people who are actually involved in the conflict and who are suffering from the conflict, but also a collateral damage to the rest of the world in terms of the economic impact, inflation, and the prices of essentials for people all over the world. So I think indebtedness of nations is also something that we have to take into account. All of this really means that the global south, the developing world, is looking to the United States to take a view that can help bring these conflicts to an end. So whoever becomes president, President Trump has a stated goal of bringing these conflicts to an end.
Yes.
President Kamala Harris has also talked about trying to put an end to the Gaza conflict and to the Middle East issue. Ukraine is more complicated, but whatever it is, I think if you see Prime Minister Modi's endeavor to reach out both to Russia and the Ukraine, it is an expression of our sentiment and that of the global south to try and bring some resolution to these conflicts in the interest of humanity and the world.
Oh, absolutely, Ambassador. In fact, the former President Donald Trump has exuded confidence of bringing a resolution to the ongoing conflicts. In fact, he's been claiming that, the unpredictability factor is actually his strength, how he's been boasting about how these conflicts never, ever had started during his tenure as a president. We're going to watch the space very closely. We have to really slip into a short break, but the news and updates continue, and we'll get you the very latest from our sister channel, CNN, on our continuing coverage of the US presidential elections.
there's a lot of, music and festivity, and it's like a celebration. It's a bit like how the Harris campaign ended on a very optimistic note, on a note of hope and change, as opposed to the Trump campaign, which ended in a very dark, dour kind of note. The question is, which of the two bases were motivated enough to turn out in larger numbers today? We do know that in places like Philadelphia, for example, there were huge voter turnout, even in Georgia, in Nevada.